All right, let's talk about the First Lady's husband, President Trump. He was up early this morning tweeting about ESPN and perhaps more ominously, NFL tax breaks. First up, ESPN. Quote, with Jemele Hill at the mic, it's no wonder ESPN ratings have tanked. In fact, tanked so badly, it is the talk of the industry. Hill has been suspended for 2 weeks for violating the network's social media policy for a second time. This time, Hill wasn't calling the president a white supremacist. She was tweeting about the owner of the Dallas Cowboys, Jerry Jones, who said he'd bench players who kneeled during the national anthem. Here's what Hill tweeted about that. Quote, Cowboys have a huge national following. Lots of black and brown folks are Cowboys fans. What if they turned their backs on them? This play always works. Change happens when advertisers are impacted. If you feel strongly about Jerry Jones' statement, boycott his advertisers. Okay, so now to the tax part of this equation. President Trump also threatened to end the massive tax breaks, that's what he called them, for the NFL. Joining me now to talk about this and more, Bruce Levell. He's the executive director of the National Diversity Coalition for President Trump, and Ephraim Salaam. He's a former NFL player. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So, Ephraim, I'll start with you.
Okay.
So, Jemele Hill said she wasn't asking fans to actually boycott the NFL. But she was asking to boycott advertisers, and that's kind of like a...
It's pretty much the same thing. I don't want to misconstrue her tweets or anything, but it's one thing I know about the NFL, is when you start talking about affecting their bottom line, then things start to happen. So ESPN has a relationship, a very lucrative relationship with the NFL, and if one of their on-air personalities is directly or indirectly stating that maybe advertisers should pull out or boycott or fans should boycott, we saw what happened when Trump said, fans should leave.
I just want to back up a little bit. So she tweets out that Trump is a white supremacist, and that doesn't get her suspended. But if it affects the bottom line...
But it doesn't directly affect ESPN's relationship with the NFL. This is what we're talking about. We're talking about the relationship between a network and one of the biggest entities in terms of viewership.
I think I clearly get what you're saying,
Absolutely.
Bruce. I just think it's just so cynical, Bruce.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hey, thanks for having me, Carol. And prayers for the folks out in the West Coast and all the fires. So just want to send our prayers and condolences. And thanks for having me. It's interesting on the Jemele, conversation we're having here. It's interesting the president, when he announced for, running for office, all of a sudden he became this, quote, you're racist. And, President Trump has been out in the public sector for over 40-plus years. As a matter of fact, I watched him in a Bobby Brown video the other night in 1989, and he's been all over and traveled many, hundreds of thousands of miles and been in contact with many cultures across the country, went through 17 candidates in the primary, and not one person rose that question. The unfortunate part of it is in Jemele is that, she does work for ESPN, and she took her own personal platform on ESPN, their dime, per se, and threw this accusation out there. Carol, it's no different than you coming out having your own personal deal on this show on something totally unrelated to this show or this network. And, I commend the First Amendment. I'm a First Amendment advocate. I think there's a place and time, but I think at the end of the day, it's unfair to take your own personal agenda and use it on another person's dime, respectfully.
So Ephraim, do you agree with Bruce that, President Trump's out partying with Bobby Brown, and that kind of is a clue he's not racist at all?
The funny thing is, actions speak louder than words. And when you have a history, including lawsuits against him and his father about their practices against minorities in their own buildings that they own. All of this is documented. Those things speak louder to me than being in the Bobby Brown video. They're not the same thing. She was at home, and she was commenting like most of us do on Twitter.
But, I work for a broadcast entity, and
absolutely.
Man,
you always have to be mindful when you're tweeting about what you're saying.
Yeah, definitely. But here's the thing, Bruce. Why keep harping on it? President Trump made his point. Jemele Hill has been suspended. He's got the national anthem thing going for him, right? Jerry Jones said if anybody doesn't stand for the national anthem, then the player will be benched. So why doesn't he just leave it alone now?
Well, I can't speak for the president on that, but I will tell you the emotions where this came from. When my father gets called home to the Lord, he's going to be under a flag. He's a retired command sergeant major. My uncle is a sergeant major. My other uncles were master sergeants. You know, there's a rich family history in my family especially, that were soldiers, and when we lay them to rest, you know, Carol, they are under the flag. So with all due respect, there is an emotional...
I totally get both sides
well,
of
that's
the
where the
argument.
emotional attachment's coming from.
But at this point in time, with so much happening in the world, and there's so much happening,
right,
and there's so much about our economy that needs fixed, why doesn't President Trump just leave it alone?
Well, you know, like I said, I can't speak for him, but I will say, you know, Carol, if you know, the president is known to be a counterpuncher, and also just for for this show, he is the youngest NFL player to start in the Super Bowl ever. So I want to give you that shout out because I'm from Atlanta and I enjoyed watching you in 1998 win the championship for the Falcons.
Appreciate that.
I just wanted to give you your accolades on that, sir. But go ahead.
No, I just wanted to get to this point. Like, has President Trump, in your mind, made his point?
Well,
do you understand where he's coming from?
I understand where he's coming from, but the thing, I don't believe it, all right? Because here's a man who's preaching, yes, he is the president, and he's preaching patriotism, being unpatriotic, being patriotic, and he's exhibited actions in his own life that don't seem very patriotic to me. We all know what those are: drafting the Dodgers multiple times, making fun of a Gold Star family at the loss of their child, making fun of John McCain, calling him a loser because he was a POW. This is a man who said, I will not come home until all of the POWs come home. Those things are unpatriotic. So all of a sudden, he wants to be patriotic because African-American athletes are taking a knee at the national anthem, which from many, including my father who served in the armed forces, and many other people in the armed forces, don't consider taking a knee at the flag a form of disrespect. Now all of a sudden it's disrespectful, it's unpatriotic, and I just don't know where the lines are being blurred. He's trying to sell us on something to rile everybody up. The first thing you can do to get a country behind you is to blame somebody for being unpatriotic and ungrateful for this great country we live in, and I think that's what the agenda is. And he himself has shown to be unpatriotic.
I get you. So Bruce,
doesn't make sense
do you understand where Ephraim is coming from? Because, you know, this show is all about sort of bringing the two sides together.
Absolutely.
Finding common ground.
Right.
So do you think it's time that, you know, we all have our opinions of kneeling at the national anthem? I don't think many minds are going to be changed at this point.
Right.
I don't think many minds are going to be changed about Jamel Hill, right? And what she said on Twitter about you know, Mr. Trump being a white supremacist. So is it time we just let this go?
Well, you know, I'm very optimistic. You know, look at our economy. I mean, Carol, we had 1.2 million jobs since February.
But that's not what I asked you.
But I'm giving you the optimism, the fact that where we're going.
Economy is great.
You want to talk about positive?
I'm not disagreeing.
The numbers, man.
I just want to know from you, being a Trump supporter, if it's time to let this go as his diversity guy, because your job is to kind of bring the sides together.
I think that Vice President Pence and the President of the United States has stood for and will always stand for being a patrioot for this flag of this great nation that allows all religions, all cultures, no matter where it's served under. So that's the passion, Carol. So if Vice President Pence or President Trump is ever challenged that, they will always counter with their passion back. Now,
but
obviously, it's more sensationalized.
He himself has challenged that.
You know,
he himself has challenged.
But here's the thing. Look where we're at with this flag,
the two
Carol.
sides together.
Look, I don't want to keep the argument. I don't want to argue. I just want to have a discussion. I think that's where everybody, you know, gets off kilter because everybody wants to argue. I'm open to listen, but you have to speak on the man's actual actions. It's not about what he's saying now. It's about the things that he's actually done in his life. So you can't sell me on someone who's all-encompassing, who hasn't had racist tendencies, and who hasn't been unpatriotic. You can't sell me on that with him because I know. And look, I know you have a relationship with him, all right? Have you ever sat him down and been like, yo, Donald, you know, Mr. President, or whatever the relationship you guys have, you'd be like, yo, maybe you need to pull back a little bit and let's look at this thing through broad lenses and stop being so agitated and agitative on Twitter. Have you ever had that conversation?
Well, I think with all due respect, sir, you know, one thing about this president in terms of his communication through his Twitter.
No, I think actually that's a good question, Bruce. Have you ever had a conversation like that because you're his diversity guy?
Well, you know, Carol, I think, you know, in terms of this gentleman's opinion, it's everyone's opinion when you dislike or like something at the president. It doesn't mean you know, that he is not entitled to an opinion. But, you know, here we go. Where did this all come from? This whole conversation with the NFL came from Colin Kaepernick. Am I correct?
I don't want to go back over history. I just want to know, have you ever had a conversation with President Trump about this issue from a diversity council standpoint? And should you have that conversation, would it be valuable at all?
Yes.
Well, I think it's always valuable to bring good dialogue to the table, Carol. But this is one thing I want to get to, please, respectfully. Where did this all come from? This came from Colin Kaepernick, correct? We all agree, the NFL, right? Now, what I'm saying is, I sat in the room with Jim Brown and President Trump back in November when Jim Brown came over and President Trump started working with America I Can. I think Ephraim knows about that organization.
Absolutely.
Where I'm disappointed is that I was like, my goodness, here's something where we could take some fame, and the whole issue was brutality with police. I think that's where this came from, if I'm not mistaken. But what devalued it is the fact that Colin came out and wore socks with pictures of police and pigs, and then a picture of Fidel Castro. So I'm just saying, this was a great opportunity to take fame like a Jim Brown and take it and use it for something positive, to go in the local community, to get involved with your city council, your state house rep, your state senate, be involved civically. That way you can have a decision on who selects the police chief.
Maybe you could suggest President Trump tweet that out, because that would be awesome.
That's all we're saying.
We can all agree on that. Whoop, whoop.
You're the head of his diversity council. Let's just, help him. He needs help, obviously.
I'm going to call Ephraim offline. He's going to join, too.
Okay.
No.
Yes. Yeah.
Hey, look, the president doesn't want me in there because I'm going to keep it real with him. Right?
That's why we love you, Ephraim.
I'm not going to dance around him, and I'm not going to do what he asks me to do.
That's why we love you.
I'm going to keep it real with him and let him know what the people really think.
All right, I got it there. Ephraim Salam, Bruce Levell. Thanks to both of you.
Thanks for having me.